Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is Prorevenge story. Characters: teacher, Mr. Miller, counselor, Miss Cooper, me, mom, and my friend William. All the names have been changed. The story begins when I was in 3rd grade 8 years ago. I should mention that I have mild Asperger's syndrome, which wasn't diagnosed until recently. Probably the main reason I became an easy target for bullies. In 2015, we moved from a rough neighborhood to what seemed like a better one. At first, everything looked promising, but that changed when I started at the local public school. Despite its reputation as the best school in the area, those 2 years turned out to be the worst of my life. I was assigned to Mr. Miller's class. He was my mom's friend's brother, and she assured us he understood my challenges. "He's great with special needs kids," she said. "He'll take good care of your daughter." I'd been seeing different psychiatrists trying to figure out what made me different, but none could really explain it. We couldn't have been more wrong about Mr. Miller. From day one, he started picking on me. "Can't you even write properly?" he'd snap when I struggled with taking notes. "Everyone else manages just fine." I hated writing with a passion, and he knew it. He'd deliberately assign tasks that involved extensive writing, watching me struggle with a smirk on his face. "Miss Smarty Pants doesn't need to take notes, does she?" he'd say to the class. "She thinks she's special." The situation got worse when my classmates, except for William, started joining in. They'd corner me during breaks, pushing and hitting until I wet myself. Sometimes they'd grab my backpack and throw it out the window. "Look at the baby," they'd taunt. "She can't even hold it in." Being the naive, overly kind kid I was, I kept quiet. I didn't tell my mom or the other teachers, knowing they'd face serious consequences if she found out. The class knew this too. My mom had caught them once beating me up and made sure those kids got suspended for 2 weeks and were disciplined by their parents. One day, after those suspended kids returned, I noticed them huddled with Mr. Miller, shooting death glares my way. I buried my nose in my book, being the bookworm I was and still am, ignoring their whispers. Looking back, I should have paid more attention to what was happening. "Hey everyone, come here for a minute," Mr. Miller called out to the class, deliberately excluding me. "Not you," he said when I started to get up. I saw William's face turn pale as Mr. Miller whispered something to the group. During lunch break, everything went wrong. The kids surrounded me, dragging me toward the 4th floor window. "Let's see if the freak can fly," someone shouted. I was terrified, knowing my small frame wouldn't survive the fall. Just as they were about to push me out, William charged through the circle. "Stop it!" he yelled, pulling me away from the window. "Are you all crazy?" The other kids immediately ran to tell Mr. Miller that William had interfered. Soon after, William became their new target too. While this was happening, we didn't notice Mr. Miller slip out of the classroom. He went straight to Miss Cooper, the school counselor, a woman I'd openly called a witch due to my lack of verbal filter. She called my mom, claiming I had attempted suicide. "Mrs. Mitchell, your daughter tried to jump out the window today," she said with fake concern in her voice. Mom rushed to school, and I was called to Miss Cooper's office. When I tried explaining what really happened, both adults dismissed me. "She's making up stories again," Miss Cooper said condescendingly. "Classic attention-seeking behavior," Mr. Miller added. But William spoke up, his voice shaking with anger. "They're lying! I saw everything! Mr. Miller told them to do it." That's when Mom lost it. "I will end your careers," she said, her voice deadly calm. "Mark my words." I begged her to let it go, but instead she started secretly documenting every bruise, every incident, collecting statements from William about the ongoing bullying we both endured. The next year was even worse. The bullying intensified, but William stood by me despite becoming an outcast himself. His grades plummeted because he was protecting the crazy girl, as they called me. "You don't have to do this," I told him once. "Yes, I do," he replied. "Friends stick together." The final straw came with our last assignment from Mr. Miller, writing about our feelings toward our teacher. Wanting to show I harbored no ill will, I created a large, colorful poster saying, "I love you, my teacher." Mr. Miller immediately stormed to Miss Cooper's office. "Call her mother now," he demanded. "She needs to be expelled." When Mom arrived, the conversation went like this. "Why exactly are you trying to expel my daughter?" Mom asked calmly. "Because she's fasterous king trying to ruin my marriage," Mr. Miller exploded. "She's always disrupting my class." "Yes, and don't forget her suicide attempt," Miss Cooper began. "Oh, you mean the one you fabricated?" Mom interrupted. "I have proof of everything you've done to my daughter since day one. The Ministry of Education will be very interested in seeing it." They laughed it off until we went to the principal's office. Mom made a call to her contact at the Ministry of Education, explaining everything and promising to send her evidence. The look on their faces when they received notification that their teaching licenses were being revoked was unforgettable. I was moved to a different class, a rare occurrence in our school system, and the rest of my time there was peaceful. The bullies never came near me again. As for William, we're still friends and keep in touch regularly. Sometimes we look back on those days and marvel at how we made it through together. The next one is an entitled people story. I am. My property sits on the edge of a neighborhood, with about 2 acres of wooded land behind my house that slopes down to a small creek. It's been in my family for over 40 years. My parents built the house in the early 80s, and I inherited it when they moved to Florida 5 years ago. The neighborhood next to mine started as a small collection of homes, but expanded over the years. About 3 years ago, they formed an HOA. I never joined because my property predated their development and was technically outside their boundaries. I kept to myself, maintained my property, and minded my own business. Everything was fine until last spring when I noticed surveyors trampling through my backyard one Saturday morning. I was having coffee on my back deck when I spotted 3 men with equipment walking around, putting stakes in the ground and taking measurements. I walked over to see what was going on. "Excuse me, can I help you, gentlemen? This is private property." The lead surveyor, a balding man with a clipboard, barely glanced at me. "We're conducting a survey for the Maple Creek HOA. Nothing to worry about." "I think there's been a misunderstanding," I said. "This is my property, and I'm not part of any HOA." He looked annoyed now. "Look, we have authorization from the board to survey this area. They're planning to extend the community walking trail through here." "Walking trail through my backyard? I think you need to leave." The surveyor sighed, like I was being difficult. "Sir, the HOA president assured us this land belongs to the community. If you have concerns, take it up with her." I was getting frustrated. "I'm not taking anything up with anyone. This is my property and you're trespassing. Please leave now." One of the other surveyors, younger and more reasonable, looked uncomfortable. "Maybe we should double-check the property lines, Jim." But Jim wasn't having it. "We have our orders." The HOA president was very clear. At this point, I went back inside and called the police non-emergency line, but they suggested I call 911 since there were trespassers currently on my property who refused to leave. When I called 911, I explained the situation calmly, and they said they'd send someone out. While waiting for the police, I went to my office and grabbed my property deed and survey documents. I keep them in a fireproof safe along with other important papers. I also grabbed the most recent property tax statement, which clearly showed I was the owner and taxpayer of record. About 15 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up. The officer, a woman in her 30s named Officer Martinez, according to her nameplate, approached me on the deck where I was waiting. "I understand you have people trespassing on your property?" she asked. I nodded and pointed toward the surveyors who were still working. "Those men are surveying my land without permission. They claim they're working for the HOA, but I'm not a member of any HOA, and this is my private property." Officer Martinez walked with me over to the surveyors, who looked surprised to see a police officer. "Gentlemen, I understand there's a dispute about whose property this is," she said. Jim, the lead surveyor, straightened up. "We're conducting authorized work for the Maple Creek Homeowners Association. They're planning a community trail through this greenbelt area." I handed Officer Martinez my documents. "This is my property deed and survey, plus my latest property tax statement. As you can see, this land belongs to me, not any HOA." She reviewed the paperwork carefully, then looked at Jim. "Do you have documentation showing the HOA owns this property or has an easement?" Jim hesitated. "Well, no, but the HOA president assured us." "Without proper documentation, you appear to be trespassing on private property," Officer Martinez interrupted. "I need to ask you to pack up your equipment and leave." Jim looked stunned. "But the HOA president specifically told us—" "I understand you were following instructions," Officer Martinez said, "but based on the documentation I'm seeing, this is private property. You need permission from the owner to be here, which you don't have." The younger surveyor was already packing up. "Come on, Jim. We can sort this out with the HOA later." Reluctantly, Jim and the third surveyor began gathering their equipment. As they headed toward the street, Jim turned to me. "The HOA president isn't going to be happy about this." "That's not my problem," I replied. After the surveyors left, Officer Martinez gave me her card. "If they come back without permission, call us again. You might want to put up some no trespassing signs along your property line." I thanked her and she left. I thought that would be the end of it, but the next day my doorbell rang. A woman in her 50s with perfectly highlighted hair and an expression that screamed, "I want to speak to your manager," stood on my porch. "I'm Diane Harlow, president of the Maple Creek HOA," she announced. "I understand you had our surveyors removed from community property yesterday." I took a deep breath. Miss Harlow, that's not community property. It's my private property. I have the deed and survey to prove it. She waved her hand dismissively. There's been a misunderstanding. Our development plans show that area as community greenbelt. We're planning a walking trail that would benefit everyone, including you. I'm not interested in a walking trail through my backyard, I said firmly. And there's no misunderstanding. I have the legal documents proving I own that land. Her smile tightened. Listen, we're trying to improve property values for everyone. You're being very selfish. The HOA board has already approved the plans. Your HOA has no authority over my property, I explained. I'm not a member of your HOA, and my property predates your development. We'll see about that, she said, her tone suddenly cold. The HOA has lawyers, you know. After she left, I decided to be proactive. I called a local attorney who specialized in real estate and HOA disputes. During our consultation, I explained the situation and showed him my documents. You're absolutely in the right, he assured me. Your property is clearly delineated in these surveys and there's no easement or right-of-way granted to the HOA. They have no legal claim to your land. He suggested sending a formal cease and desist letter to the HOA board, which we did. I also took Officer Martinez's advice and installed no trespassing signs along my property line. A week later, I received a certified letter from the HOA's attorney claiming that my property was subject to HOA covenants based on a neighborhood integration clause in their bylaws. The letter demanded I remove the no trespassing signs and allow the survey to continue. My attorney laughed when I showed him. This is nonsense. They can't retroactively claim jurisdiction over property that existed before their HOA. We'll respond and make it clear they're overstepping. 2 days later, I came home from work to find surveyors on my property again, along with Diane and 2 other people I assumed were HOA board members. I immediately called 911 and then my attorney. This time, 2 police officers responded. One was Officer Martinez from before. I explained the situation again and showed them the cease and desist letter my attorney had sent, as well as the HOA's response. Miss Harlow, Officer Martinez said, this property does not belong to your HOA. You've been informed of this already, and now you're trespassing again after being warned. Diane was indignant. Our HOA attorney assured us we have jurisdiction over this greenbelt area. We have every right to be here. Do you have a court order or any legal document giving you authority over this property? Officer Martinez asked. Well, no, but... Then you need to leave immediately, the other officer stated firmly. All of you. One of the board members tugged at Diane's sleeve. Maybe we should go, Diane. We can discuss this with the attorney. Diane glared at me. This isn't over. After they left, my attorney suggested we file for a temporary restraining order against the HOA to prevent further trespassing. The judge granted it the next day, and the HOA was legally barred from entering my property. I thought that would be the end of it, but 2 weeks later I received notice that the HOA was suing me, claiming their development plans included an easement through my property based on the original subdivision plans from the 1970s. My attorney was confident. This is a nuisance lawsuit. They're hoping you'll give in rather than fight. But we have all the documentation we need to win. The case went to court 3 months later. The HOA's attorney presented their case first, showing plans for their walking trail and arguing that the original subdivision plans included a utility easement that could be repurposed for community use. When it was our turn, my attorney methodically dismantled their argument. He presented the original property survey from when my parents bought the land, showing it was never part of the planned subdivision. He showed my property deed with its clear boundaries and my tax records proving I'd been paying taxes on that land for years. Finally, he presented aerial photos showing how my property had been maintained separately from the HOA area for decades. The judge didn't even need to deliberate for long. He ruled in my favor, dismissed the HOA's lawsuit, and the most satisfying part, ordered the HOA to pay my legal fees, which had reached nearly $8,000. After the ruling, my attorney and I walked out of the courthouse feeling victorious. In the hallway, we passed Diane and the HOA attorney, both looking grim. I hope the board enjoyed spending HOA dues on a frivolous lawsuit, I couldn't help saying as we passed. The aftermath was surprisingly positive. Several of my neighbors from the HOA area came by in the following weeks to apologize. It turned out Diane had undertaken the walking trail project without properly consulting many of the members, and the lawsuit had angered a lot of people when they learned how much it cost. 6 months later, I heard Diane had been voted out as HOA president. The new board reached out through my attorney to apologize formally and assure me they respected my property rights. As a goodwill gesture, I did allow them to build a small bench and bird feeding station at the edge of my property near the creek, accessible from their existing path. It was my choice on my terms, and I've actually enjoyed chatting with neighbors who stopped there. The experience taught me the importance of knowing your property rights and standing your ground when necessary. I'm grateful I had my documentation in order and didn't back down when intimidated. Not all HOA stories have happy endings, but I'm glad mine did. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Back before cell phones and TSA checkpoints, I was working as an admin assistant. Ray was my department head and had a great sense of humor. When I was hired on, Ray made sure I understood that I worked for him. Even though I would do some office-wide work, he was my boss. Clint was in charge of another department in our office. Flying from our office to a satellite office for a day or two was common for people in both departments, and I was in charge of making standard pre-approved travel arrangements. If someone needed to change unexpectedly, they were supposed to handle those themselves. Clint seemed unable to understand that. At some point, Clint decided that he wanted to cut travel costs. Lowest possible fare, lowest possible rate for his department. Lowest possible fares were always the 5 a.m. outbound and 11 p.m. return flights. Clint didn't care. A couple weeks into this policy, Clint is headed to the satellite office for some in-person meetings. Game on, lowest possible fare, lowest possible rate. Clint left on the 5 a.m. flight. The lowest rate car rental company didn't keep their cars available at the airport. Clint had to take the shuttle to their off-site location to pick up his car. Sadly for Clint, the shuttle didn't start running until 8 when his first meeting was scheduled to start. Oops. The client refused to reschedule that day, but agreed to the next morning. At some point it dawned on Clint that he either had to fly home and back or get a room for the night. He chose to get a room, and of course call me. One lowest possible rate room coming up. Unsurprisingly, that room didn't have security on site like he was used to. It did have little multi-legged friends, if his complaints were true. The next morning, Clint headed out, in the previous day's suit, only to discover that his car had been broken into overnight. The police took their time arriving, and by the time they were done, Clint had missed his meeting again. Somehow, Clint got the client to reschedule again, and he decided to take the flight home and back the next day. Of course, I was kind enough to remember the lowest possible fare rule, so Clint was booked on the 11 p.m. flights home and 5 a.m. return, even though his meeting was midday. This time, the lowest rate car was at the airport, so Clint got to skip the shuttle. Sigh, you can't win them all. At that point, Clint's lowest possible policy had already cost the company at least double what a normal trip would have. Not to mention all the time I had spent calling hotels, motels, and car rental companies. The next day, he's on the 5 a.m. flight and makes it to his meeting. I don't know when he realized that he didn't want the lowest possible fare at 11 p.m. I do know he decided to take the more expensive, earlier flight home both days. Somehow, he discovered that he could change that himself. The next time I saw Clint, he tried to fire me. Too bad I worked for Ray, who knew and laughed about the whole thing. Clint was furious, but there wasn't anything he could do. The company would back Ray, and Ray was backing me. Clint changed the room rate policy because of his experience, but refused to rescind the lowest fare and lowest rental rate policy. That was until accounting let slip that not only had Clint figured out how to take the higher-priced earlier flight, he figured out an upgraded seat as well. Clint found himself with an entire department intentionally missing their 5 a.m. flights, and rebooking for the more expensive 8 a.m., which somehow only had upgraded seats available every time. Rental car reservations were missed and more expensive cars were rented. Meetings that were previously in the office were somehow only available after hours, so clients were taken to dinner. Dinner included alcohol, so rooms were booked at hotels closest to the restaurants, and returning flights scheduled for the next day. Less than a month later, all lowest price policies were rescinded. I was allowed to book normally again, and the missed flights, upgraded seats, and fancy hotels disappeared. Dinner meetings remained, but decreased dramatically. When I left, Clint's reputation still hadn't recovered. The next one is an entitled people story. I feel like I need to start this by saying I don't hate dogs. I really do believe that there are no bad dogs, only bad owners. But I don't like it when strange dogs jump on me, shed, or slobber all over me. I really hate it when loose dogs run at me or chase me. Just because you like the dog doesn't mean everyone will turn to mush over it or even wants to interact with it. I live in a neighborhood where the fences were built at the same time as the houses, and they are not terribly secure. There are things you can do about it, but it seems that not enough of the residents have bothered because loose dogs are a common occurrence. Of course, there are a large number repeat offenders, and those people never take accountability. They just blame the poor fence construction and shrug it off, and dogs being dogs. Recently, one of the repeat offenders sent letters to everyone in the neighborhood explaining proper loose dog etiquette. She also posted it to several of the neighborhood forums. It was ridiculous. But the gist of it is her darling fur babies or geriatric giant puppies got out. And she didn't care for how the dogs were treated by the people who found them, so she was determined to educate everyone on how it should have gone, at least according to her. She of course explained that her dogs never get out, and this was a first, despite multiple posts going back at least a year featuring those same dogs on loose dogs spotted on X street posts. She went on for half a page about how the fences are the real issue. My next-door neighbors have never had an issue with their 2 dogs because they secured the fence. And that dogs getting out is just something that happens even under the best circumstances, so we all need to be aware of the proper way to handle it. And then she went on to explain the do's and don't of how to handle it. Do call the dogs to you so you can bring it into your house or at least your yard in order to make sure the dog is safe and secure. Don't ignore it and let it continue to wander. It's probably lonely and scared. I mean, the poor puppy is lost after all. Do make sure it's warm, dry, and comfortable. Don't under any circumstances feed it. You don't know if it's on a special diet. You might make it sick, so just don't feed it at all. Do take a picture, or a lot from many different angles, just in case. And post it to all the social media platforms. That way the poor baby's worried mama can find it. Don't, whatever you do, bring it to a shelter. It doesn't matter if it's been a few hours or a few days and no one has come looking for it. The owner might be busy or not realize the dog is missing. The shelters are terrible, cruel places, and the dogs will be lonely and scared. Plus, when the dog mommy finally realizes her precious baby is missing, she might not be able to afford the fine, or if it's over the weekend, she might have to wait till Monday to get it out. The shelter, even if it's no kill, is the wrong thing to do always and forever. And of course, if you have done all of the above and find that you just do not have the ability to continue to care for what is now a very hungry and confused animal, then you should go back to social media and beg one of the many strangers on the internet to take the dog and care for it until its mommy or daddy can finally be bothered to get it. I was dying. I thought it was a prank. But seriously, the Facebook post, between the original post and all the comments, was the best of all. Apparently, when the woman's dogs got out, which regardless of what she said seems to happen regularly, someone did catch them and made a good faith effort to find the owner. They posted on 2 neighborhood forums and kept the dogs overnight and fed them in the morning with their own dogs. The next afternoon, when the dogs were still unclaimed, they took the dogs to a local no-kill shelter. It was late Friday afternoon by then, and that particular shelter does not have public hours after 4:30 or at all on weekends. These dogs had no collars, tags, or microchips. Saturday morning, the owner finally saw the social media post and was livid to discover that her fur babies that she claims to be unable to be parted from for even an hour, but had by then been missing for 2 days, and no, the owner was not out of town, had been fed strange food by complete strangers and then dumped at a shelter. Worse still, she was unable to retrieve her sweet babies until Monday. She was also furious about the expensive fine. I looked it up. The first offense is like $10. It's repeat offenses that get pricey. The letter and the Facebook posts were not even subtly calling these people out as dog-hating, irresponsible jerks who tried to break up her family. Sorry, maybe dogs getting out is a thing that just happens. I personally think that's a BS excuse. But if your dog gets out and I happen to encounter it, if it appears aggressive, there is a pretty good chance it's getting a face full of pepper spray and then animal control is getting a phone call. If it's not aggressive, I'll either ignore it, or if it keeps hanging around and no one has come looking for it, yeah, that doggy is going to the shelter. I may or may not bother to post it to social media. I'm even less likely after this. Maybe instead of calling out the kind people who took your loose dogs in when you couldn't be bothered to look for them, you should just be happy they put in the effort they did. The next one is an entitled parent story. This conversation popped up at the wake of my grandmother's funeral. She was holding her plate of food and sat down next to my aunt and me in a couch, very smug-looking and kept smirking at people as if she's any better than them. Turned out she had it in her head somehow that she'd be moving to another country with me and my partner and our kids. Because Grandma had passed away, so she'd have no responsibility like that, and she's retired. So she had gone around telling people how she'd be living a ravishing, retired lifestyle in a rich Scandinavic country for free without having to raise any damn finger. She asked me loudly, "So when does my flight leave?" I asked what the hell did she mean by that, and she said loudly so everyone could hear, "You know our flight back to your husband's country so I can live luxuriously like you promised me?" I promised her duck all other than never gonna talk to her again after I flew back. So me being me and my incapability to sugarcoat anything, I blatantly told her that it'd never happen because I'm not stupid enough to bring her dangerous ass around my children. The face crack of the century, let me tell you. My aunt and the rest of the room cackled. She then thought she heard it wrong, so I repeated again. You're not moving in with me, and you can erase that idea from your brain because you're a dangerous, lazy, greedy person, and I am not about to introduce that type of energy to my children. She then threw tantrums, yelling and shouting about how she's entitled to move in with me and be taken care of by the family. I argued back that unless she would be willing to find a place to stay over there herself, find a job, learn a new language, and actually work again, then she would not survive because I have kids to take care of, and I'm not about to be taking my energy and time off them to cater to her lazy ass. She then went silent on me and refused to talk to me for the rest of the evening. Fine by me, fine by everyone else. They just had a good time giggling at how delusional she was. Anyway,